technically every single airline in the world in its current format will go bankrupt in the next 60 days. That's undeniable. It doesn't matter which airline it is. It could be Emirates that's state supported. It could be the US carriers. There's probably a handful of airlines. 95% of the airlines will go bankrupt by May.
Welcome to Talks with Elona, Untold Stories. I am your host, Elona, and today is going to be a good one. I am talking to James Asquith. He is the official Guinness World Record holder, youngest person to visit every sovereign country in the world. He is an entrepreneur, he is an author, and he is the CEO of an amazing company called HolidaySwap. To me, James is a very good friend, easily one of the most intelligent people that I know. He is an expert in aviation, so in our conversation, you could expect a lot about aviation, but I'm sure that we'll sprinkle a little bit of economics on top. Without further ado, let's go call James. Full disclaimer, all the stories in the series, real people, but also just their opinions. Please consult the CDC, WHO websites for the most up-to-date factual information on the coronavirus. Hi, first of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I know you're very busy right now, and thank you for hopping on with me. You are an industry specialist, aviation connoisseur. How many flights were you on last year?
166 last year.
All right, so I got the right person on the call with me. Listen, so I'm just so curious to know all your thoughts on aviation in generally. So today is March 25th. It's important to say that because things change day by day. March 25th, how is the aviation industry impacted? Did airlines take the appropriate steps in the last 2 weeks to a month?
In this situation, it's super important to obviously say that no one's really an expert on talking about anything right now. And everything's very interconnected, right? So you're going to have a school of thinking which is completely right in terms of do everything it takes, like ground everything, shut everything down to save lives and stay at home, right? And you can't argue with that. That's undeniable. But you have another school of thinking which does look at the huge impact. And it's important to note that people that turn around and say, the economy will recover, it doesn't matter, just stop everything. That's not also necessarily the right school of thinking. So I'm not right. No one's necessarily right. But what people have seen and that they can do individually to actually prevent the spread of the situation is to stay at home. There's never going to be a right answer to this. And we're going to look back in 6 months, a year, maybe even longer, and say, did we do too much or did we do too little? Probably saying did we do too little is not going to be on the table. But did we do too much potentially because people aren't looking at the necessary indirect impact of what's going on? So on the surface, you could look at aviation and say, technically, every single airline in the world in its current format will go bankrupt in the next 60 days. That's undeniable. It doesn't matter which airline it is. It could be Emirates that's state supported. It could be the US carriers. There's probably a handful of airlines. 95% of the airlines will go bankrupt by May. It's just simple economics. Like you have huge costs, like the margins in aviation are tiny as it is. If there is a problem in the world, whether it's a volcano erupting or a strike or, maintenance issues or Dreamliner grounding, you name it, like aviation deals with it. And then obviously you've got this huge curveball situation too. So there's a lot of jobs and livelihoods at stake, and you can turn around on a really, top line level and say, yes, obviously it should be grounded because it can be supported and things can come back and obviously pause everything for a couple of months. But then you can also look at examples such as Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, who didn't ground flights, and even until a couple of days ago did not ground flights. The reason they are now grounding flights is because the pandemic isn't under control in Europe and in the US, and they want to protect their borders. However, people are listening to the chief of the World Health Organization like it's gospel, and quite honestly, the guy's been consistently wrong. Again, it's so important to say I am not an expert in this. But, he turned around on the 3rd of February this year and said to those countries that I just mentioned, there is absolutely no need to disrupt travel. It's not necessary to prevent the spread of this. They actually already on February 1st, before he said that, restricted travel to in Wuhan, in the epicenter, because there is an element of a proportional response here, and that's not just in aviation, that's everything worldwide. And if there is an epicenter in somewhere which is really struggling to contain anything, yes, shutting it down is potentially worth it. But you could also look on the other side of the argument and say, look, it's still not under control in somewhere like Italy. Is lockdown really working? Like, is it really working? Because people are locked down for 23 hours and 45 minutes a day. And then if there aren't controls in place, they're going to go to a grocery store because it's necessary, or they're going to go and get a test at hospital. And if it's an easy spreadable virus,
exactly,
it's the same effect anyway. But at the same time, the reaction is pulling the entire rug from underneath the economy. And I think it's super important to say that no one wants any lives to be lost anywhere, right? That's just, you're an awful human being if you think that. You can sit here and say there's proportional responses and look how many people die from other diseases every day and 25,000 people from starvation. That doesn't mean it's right if people can prevent the spread of something else. But it's really difficult to explain and quantify the indirect effect here that by the week is going to be occurring for years. You are indirectly, people, like, the reaction will indirectly kill millions. People are slipping into poverty by the day. We all know so many people that are out of a job. Unemployment in the US, within 6 months, by my estimate, unemployment in the US is going to hit 30%, which is staggering. Wow. Considering the reaction that people look at and say, oh my goodness, it's gone from like 4 to 4.5% in normal times. And, you can look at the real relative impact. Look at something like Venezuela, right? Venezuela has been struggling for years under sanctions. Its economy is in absolute ruin. It can't be supported. And life expectancy, people die as a result of it. There isn't food on shelves. Now, that's not going to happen in Europe and the US, but the poorest and the most vulnerable in society, who are being rightly so protected now from people's reactions staying at home, are going to be the ones that are forgotten about when things normalize, because people talking about saying, oh, like, things are going to be great afterwards, things will bounce back. To an extent, yes. But, you see a $3 trillion package from Trump announced in the US. Quite honestly, it's just a number. I have an ex-investment banking background. It could be 3 trillion, it could be 5 trillion. It's a number. And it doesn't, how's it going to actually filter down to people that need it the most, people that are struggling to put food on plates to start with? So you look at pulling out the lifeline of the economy, and that's just, in the US, as an example, in 1930, after the Great Depression, the US got built up by Roosevelt having huge public service projects, massive infrastructure. The US doesn't need that anymore. The US is a consumer and a service economy. And so many of these restaurants, so many people that relied on income from the service industry are not going to have that for a while. So, again, I'm not an expert. No one is. Is there a right response? Do you basically say, look, yeah, sure, people that are vulnerable, people that are older need to be protected? I'm optimistic. Because you have to be. Honestly, the outcome here in 60 days, in 2 months, is the world as we know it does not function. It's that simple. You cannot shut down the world. You go back to being, in caveman times, right? You can't just expect a nice, friendly caveman who lives in the village next door to come and deliver you your food, right? Things will descend into panic and pandemonium because you can't just make money. People that turn around and from a granular level say, oh, the government can support everyone, but they just can't. You cannot make money. And that's not an argument saying, oh, people should be condemned to being vulnerable because of it, but everyone's now vulnerable because of the reaction. And so, kind of in a hugely roundabout long way about aviation, there are some airlines that are still flying and connecting.
That's what I wanted to talk about. Yep.
I mean, the issue that they have is that every border is shutting down. It's protectionism. And effects away from that. And this is something that can be solved and can be dealt with, but this is globalization being dismantled bit by bit, like borders closing. Like it's never going to return to how we knew it. But people are, airlines that are connecting people internationally, like their issue is obviously most countries are not letting non-citizens in.
But what about domestically? I mean, should the U.S. continue domestic flights? Should the U.S. continue flights from places like New York, where we have half of the entire country's cases, way more probably by my estimates?
Again, that's something that I can't answer because I'm not an expert. I don't think there is I'd love to see a graph overlay, which we're going to see over the next few months, of actually the indirect effects versus the direct effect from the reaction and what people are doing with the economy. But in terms of aviation, like, is there really something that strongly shows, hey, like, you have more a chance spreading this here in an airport than you do going to the grocery store for 10 minutes a day? And again, yeah, like, you know, I was very kind of confident at the start. It's naive to think that we as individuals are not potentially a risk to anyone else, right? That's a fact. That's an undeniable fact. Am I personally scared of dying in the first place? No. Like, I've been in some pretty shady situations. That doesn't mean because I have that attitude that it's like, oh, everyone should just like not care and let's just go with it and see. I'm not saying that in the slightest, but I am saying that there are some people that have a different perspective and a different take on, you know, what is the purpose of life? And so put yourself in the idea of, hey, like, let's save life, but if this is life, then what's the point of living it? If you want to sit in your home for the rest of it. So you get in a car every day, 3,500 people die in road accidents. You get in a car, you are as big a risk to someone else as you might be going down to the grocery store and sitting in the plane. That doesn't mean we let things descend into panic and everyone has different theories of herd mentality and that a second wave will come back, which are both facts in some ways, but then people say flatten it and wait for a vaccine, etc. The reality is most people are probably going to get this. Like, that is a borderline fact without saying, you know, obviously some people might say that that's a fact or not. But then you look at, do people need to go on a jolly up the other side of the country domestically in the US? No, absolutely not. Like, that's completely stupid. Do people need to go to a bar or a club? No, that's totally nonsense as well. However, I've already heard stories, people that I know that have lost someone from this who literally cannot get back to their funeral. That's the kind of story you're going to hear more and more. Yeah. You know, if I know someone that is ill right now, like, I can't move and get to them. Yeah, sure. And domestically in the US, there's an element of mobility. You know, I'm in the UAE, borders are closed here. No one gets in, no one gets out. And a lot of other countries are like that around the world. But we live in an increasingly interconnected world from aviation. You know, lots of people don't necessarily say, oh, you know, I grew up in New York City, I live in New York City, everyone I know and care about is in New York City. People have families scattered everywhere. So, you know, that's a super tough question to answer. But again, you know, I would look at the example that Hong Kong, Singapore and Taiwan set, that they had sensible measures in place early on to start with. They've got so much experience from this, from SARS in 2003 and containing this. And they used sensible social distancing measures without having to iron fist and say, no, this is done. You know, even as of now, if you look at Hawaii, for example, yeah, there's international flights to Japan and to Asia from Hawaii, which is the US, right? There's a port of entry. So domestic and international flights are still occurring. And it's just so difficult to prove that, because
can't imagine that they're obviously not profitable. You know, so there must come a point where the airline just says, this makes no sense. Like, why are we flying if we have just not even a handful of people flying, right?
Yeah, of course. But it's a case now of, I guess in some aspects, income is income and they're losing money one way or another. People are still going to be paid salaries. And also there's an element of, you know, cargo becomes the most important issue as well. Apart from stupid panic and panic buying, the biggest testament to how our world has grown to this point is supply chains in 2020. Honestly, nothing is running out. For people that think it is, nothing is running out. And it is such a testament. Honestly, 20 years ago, you would have not been surprised that things run out, right? 20 years ago, you weren't able to order anything off online food deliveries and Amazon and you name it. But supply chains are not breaking down. People can't just go and pop down the shopping mall and get what they need. Everything's being delivered. So there's an element of, I think in some ways, we've just gone way past what's profitable, what's not. And every week that passes, it's genuinely about survival. And that becomes more and more critical. You know, there's talk of the US trying to partially reopen and stuff, or mostly get back to business by Easter right now. Doomsdayers are going to look at your president and say, oh, the guy's just thinking about the economy. In some ways, yeah, that's not cool from that perspective, but there is a critical argument in terms of, from my very strong opinion, if we are as we are now in 60 days, like it's going to be terminal. and that sounds doomsday, but I'm very positive on the situation. There's so much more going on here as well than honestly just the virus. There's you can get deep into conspiracies. I'm not into conspiracies, but there's so many other things happening behind the scenes. There is a huge political game of chess going on as well right now. You look back a couple of weeks ago. The reaction has flip-flopped from countries and regions non-stop. The reaction from EU leaders was that Donald Trump was completely crazy for shutting flights to the EU. And then the UK followed, and then EU shut flights, and then EU shut borders, and then that's now become the norm, and it's flip-flopped into, there's moral condemnation if you now don't stay at home, let alone that flights were cancelled. So
it's changing hour by hour.
It really is, and it really feels like a situation of, you can't do too much, but people are going to be judged in 6 months, a year on the fallout from it of, did we go too far? But the one thing that is 100% certain, when I kind of write articles now, trying to be positive and look at how China's, reopening, Wuhan residents are allowed to leave Wuhan from April 5th or April 8th, I believe. They've been entirely locked down, but they're able to travel again. It's a case of, when I'm posting that, all I'm seeing now is people talking about the hashtag China virus and stuff like that, which is just so damn unhelpful, because we are 6 months away from anyone needing to turn around and point fingers and start pointing blame on any aspect. However, one thing that is clear that will be questioned down the line is the utter complacency of the rest of the world, your country, my country, like most of our countries, in the complacency, sitting back and seeing the situation that happened in Asia, seeing how it was dealt on with early in Hong Kong, which is next to the country that the epicenter started from. And I believe Hong Kong still has less than 10 deaths from the virus, because they just implemented sensible measures, which didn't just basically put the elderly and those that have weaker immune systems and those that have, underlying illness issues at risk, which is the prime frontline risk for people right now. But they've also, in the West particularly, now pulled out the rug from those that could have gone out, made a living, survived, fed their families. They've pulled the rug out from them as well. And it doesn't matter what a number of a stimulus package is, they are going to be the last people to see the support.
Yeah. And I guess this begs the question, when is travel going to come back to normal? And how fast will it bounce back? Like after 9/11, we saw that it actually happened quite quickly, right? So do you expect the same to happen now, or are people going to be wary for a long time? How is tourism affected?
It's never coming back to where it was. It is the golden age of travel has just been and gone. Lots of people are talking about how flights are going to be so cheap afterwards. Absolutely not. Like, airlines are going to consolidate. Airlines need to survive. You have that flexibility of London to New York. You can take 20 flights a day and whatever time, and you can fly from Gatwick or London or JFK or Newark or you name it. You've got all this flexibility. That's been and gone. Airlines will have to consolidate not only between themselves, but routes too. The damage from this will last a decade. September 11th was very, very different. It was a huge shock, and it changed how we live massively digitally. Everyone was very kind of confident afterwards, being able to be content with the fact that you write something online or you put something on your phone, that it's watched, all in the greater good of our safety, right? Now what you do physically is also under control in terms of what you do. So a lot of things have now changed. A lot of the money's just not there for people to survive. Like, a lot of these places can't turn around and, it's all very good saying, have like a rent holiday from, paying your rent, because no one's working and people don't have that income. But then where does the rent come from? It's people that pay the mortgage on the actual property to the banks. It's like, well, then they get a holiday. And then you turn around and say, the banks can give them a holiday. The banks will ask the government for a holiday, and the government can keep coming up with stimulus packages, but it does run out. The demand's not going to be there as people think. The days of being able to go and say, hey, I'm going to go and take a trip somewhere and spend $500 or $1,000 going to the Caribbean for a week. Where are people going to get this money from now? Because people right now, if things tomorrow were to go back to normal, which they're not, sure, there could be a bounce back, like a very quick reaction from September 11th. But it is going to be a long, slow and painful recovery, even when things start reopening, and things start occurring again. I'd love to be more optimistic on that. I'm optimistic on that things will get back to normal slowly and things will start happening quicker. I think, as I said, I don't think things will go past 2 months. But I just don't. I think that people are going to have to very much think twice about what I think that there's a consumer debt crisis coming now. It's basically cemented in that fact. Yeah. People are able to go out and spend $100, $150 on a meal in New York City and put it on a credit card because they know that if they go out the next week and work their arse off in 2 jobs, they can pay for that. But if the jobs dry up and the spending dries up, then unfortunately, you struggle. The average wealth of an American is, I think, $9,500 average wealth of an American. The unfortunate thing is, I just don't see it coming back. On a positive note, there will be other things happening. People will be more prudent with how they spend their money. As human beings, we always survive. We always adapt. September 11th felt like the end of the world. Mm-hmm. The 2008 to 11 crisis felt like the end of the world, and for many people it was. We will look back, but we are told, there have been so many pandemics on the horizon, none granted spread as much as this, like Ebola and H1N1 and SARS, etc. But things do bounce back. But people are expecting a really quick bounce back by shutting down the world for a couple of weeks to a couple of months. I would manage those expectations slightly longer.
James, you mentioned adaptability, and you have this fantastic company called HolidaySwap, which essentially is a platform where you pay a $1 fee and you could swap homes with people around the world. And you must have been impacted by this. And how are you adapting to this situation? How are you innovating as a team, as a company?
We've never been more business. Obviously, no one's taking trips. So that's hugely impacted in terms of what we do. But look, with anything, we're looking forward on the horizon. From a personal point of view, I've always kind of said to people that, who also invest in this company, that I want to run it quite healthily in terms of where we're at. Back in my days of investment banking, I used to trade debt. So I hate debt. I hate the stuff. And I always wanted to ensure that we didn't have any because, in bad times, that is the first thing that gets recalled. And that is obviously back to the 08 crisis. That was then. This is very different right now because lending isn't going to be extended to individuals credit-wise, but I digress. But from that point of view, we're pretty flexible in terms of that. I'm lucky enough that I don't have to, the team is as it was still 2 months ago. I don't have to make any changes there. I don't have to make any hard decisions. So I'm super happy with that. We're still working behind the scenes like as hard as we can. Everyone works remotely anyway. So in terms of costs and, for the last couple of years with the company, I always have someone trying to push and play on my ego and say, hey, James, you want to buy the new HolidaySwap headquarters? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Because in bad times, they're going to be like, what am I sitting on, like my big throne seat, being like, this is my office, but it's pointless, it's materialistic, and, we are a modern tech company. So, look, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I always wanted to kind of, after traveling a lot, I wanted to have a company and travel. I didn't have an idea in terms of what it would be. And it kind of came to me that actually trying to solve a problem and having a sharing economy platform that allows people to go and save a ton of money on traveling by having, and this sounds like it was like kind of from what I said before, a massive plug, but generally we didn't talk about plugging anything. So look, people use their houses. You're paying your arse off for your rent or your mortgage or whatever. That's kind of your ticket to say, hey, like I'm not going to go and spend money on an Airbnb, but I'm using my house to go and swap it to community. So, look, we pulled down like kind of a lot of advertising spend and stuff in the last few weeks. We're actually finding a lot of people are still kind of on there using the platform because there is this optimism of people will want to go and travel afterwards. And absolutely, so many people are going to want to do it. You need to be prepared that certain prices and segments of the market will be more expensive, I feel. Like the accommodation side of things, hotels, because they're there, you're probably going to get some great deals as well. We want to be there. We're in 180 odd countries and we've got 600,000 users. So we want to be able to be there and say, look, people now are still matching up with people and saying, look, I've got somewhere I can stay here around the world. And for us, we're kind of quite nimble. So yes, like the very function of what we're there for is just massively been put on ice and paused. But we are kind of waiting to be able to kind of the very function of what we are, be able to kind of help people for when they want to get out there and go and see stuff again.
And we will get out there. It's gonna happen. I mean, it's gonna happen soon. We need to stay optimistic.
That's life, right? That's life, and you never see that next shot coming, right? So we're fine. We're dealing with it, and again, there's tons of other people in bigger and worse situations. So that's kind of all I can say. I know that there's a lot of other people in, even away from this, even people that are losing jobs and staying at home. Both you and I know it, and we've seen situations around the world that there's so many things that deserve attention that haven't got attention.
Absolutely.
As well, because unfortunately, even though genuinely it's pretty incredible to see this spirit from people of saying yes, staying at home, saving lives because they're the problem. So hopefully, positively and optimistically, people will look at the other things going on around the world after this and actually take a bit more note, because it is incredible to see that there is actually genuinely an incredible kind of human spirit here, where people, and I've heard so many people's reactions saying, oh, you know what, like I'll figure it out afterwards and get another job. And look, I really hope it does from that, because that's the unfortunate thing is technically, if you just turned it back on overnight and said, right, you know what, like no one's going to need money, but screw it, like, go and spend money, like it will be fine, there are jobs, it would be fine. But unfortunately, in layman's terms, from being an economics degree myself, it just won't happen like that. In China at the moment, actually, what they're doing is they're giving out like restaurants are giving out vouchers and stuff, and the government's giving out vouchers for people just to encourage them to get out there, go spend, go see friends, go reconnect. People in the government and people that are paid well are being forced in China when they walk past shops to spend a minimum of 100 renminbi as well, which is a pretty cool and good idea as well. I don't think that anyone can deny like how genuinely positive it is. The kind of slight negative, which now no one has a choice in really, was kind of at the start. I didn't necessarily fully agree with the whole blanket stay at home. I thought that could have been done better. I thought that could have been to support people that need it most in the economy, that literally have to go out and feed their families whilst staying at home if you are vulnerable, and supporting them. People don't have a choice in that now, but genuinely the reaction is incredible to see from people.
Indeed.
And how we care. I just hope that people care about all the other stuff going on in the world that isn't relevant to them, because it's never going to be on their doorstep going forward.
Right. That's a good last note to end on, I think. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wow, this was a lot more than I thought it was going to be, and I'm really grateful for your input, and I know that everyone else will be as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Can I come on again?
Huh? You want to do it again?
Yeah.
Yes, we should do this one more time and focus on the economy.